We're now going to taste Barbera, which is kind of surprising in a way. Well, what is surprising is that I love this very much, and for a very long time, many, many years, I really thought that I hated Barbera, mainly because all I ever really knew of it were wines that were very high in acidity, but without any corresponding character or body to balance that out, which is actually quite typical of how a lot of Barbera used to be. It's a grape variety that is very high in acidity, and if you don't grow it carefully and vinify it properly, you can end up with wine that just has not much character and can really be quite aggressive. It's the third most widely planted grape variety in Italy, so Barbera is found, although it's mainly a northern Italian grape variety, you find it in central Italy, you even find a bit of it in southern Italy, where it's often used in blends for its freshness and acidity, just to add an edge to grape varieties that are maybe not quite so high in acidity. The very best Barbera supposedly comes from a sub-region of Piedmont up in northwest Italy called Monferrato, which always makes me think of something. It sounds a bit like a character from Dracula, but it's not. It's a region up in Piedmont, where incidentally this fantastic Barbera comes from. The trend in the last kind of decade, 15 years, has been towards oaking Barbera, because I think a lot of people thought, well, because we're dealing with a variety that actually naturally doesn't have much tannin, so naturally doesn't have that kind of dry grip that a lot of reds have, if we put it in oak barrels, that will compensate. I've never actually come across an example like that I've really loved. I think it works best when the winemaker understands it is a lighter grape variety in that there isn't much tannin, but there is this marvellous freshness, so why don't we just go with that and make this marvellous fresh red wine. What we're trying today is a wine that comes from a very small family, the Bera family, who've been in a very tiny town called Canelli, which is actually a very important production centre for Moscato d'Asti. They've been there since 1785, so they kind of know what they're doing now. And they've now been organic for very many years, working completely naturally. They not only work organically in the vineyards, they work extremely naturally in the winery. This particular example is fermented only in stainless steel, so no hint of oak or any kind of wood. They really are looking to preserve the very fresh fruit. There is a little surprise in the wine, which, if you don't know it's coming, might be a bit of a shock, but is very delicious nonetheless. On the nose, this is classic, really good Barbera. It's got sort of cherry fruit, but stronger than that, almost dominating that, is a really lovely, rich earthiness. Not rich as in overwhelmingly powerful, but very much there. I think actually if you described a wine as earthy to someone and they really didn't know what you were talking about, this would be a really good example of wine to use, just to say that's what I'm talking about. It's so earthy, it's almost very slightly spicy, and the spice almost has a very slight perfume to it. Oh, that's so good. It's so good I actually just want to sit here and drink the whole bottle. It's incredibly easy to drink. That earthy spice comes through on the palate, but it doesn't get too much because the acidity is very fresh and keeps things really balanced and keeps it easy to drink. You do just want to keep drinking it. The surprise that I told you about is more than a slight touch of carbon dioxide, which is done on purpose. We've had many alarmed customers coming back to the shop with this bottle saying, I think there's something terribly wrong with this. if you're not expecting it, it can be a bit of a shock. But a hint of sparkle is really not unusual in a lot of Italian reds, and just adds to that element of freshness. It's also important to remember that these wines are fantastically good with rich food because they really help to cut through it, and the carbon dioxide just adds to that. So if you are having a meal of something like lasagna, for example, which is actually quite a rich dish because you've got that tomato sauce, you've got the meat, you've got cheese, a wine like this is absolutely perfect. It cuts all through that richness without adding another layer of richness on top, which can make the whole thing completely unbearable. So for drinking pretty much any time of year, to be honest, this is so good. Very natural wine, really only a hint of sulfur dioxide and nothing else in it. This is a very strong recommendation.